All right, well, let's turn the page to our headline story today, critically important story, the story of Palestinian resistance. So an eternal story in many ways, but what we recently just saw with the attempt by the Israeli Defense Forces, so-called Defense Forces, I should say, to raid the Jenin camp. And we are very, very honored to be joined once again here by Ali Abunimah, who's the director of the Electronic Intifada and the author of The Battle for Justice in Palestine. Ali, thank you so much for being back with us.
Well, I'm never here for good news, so I'm always happy to talk to you guys, but we have to find a happy occasion to talk about one day.
Yes,
One
I
day.
agree 100%, and a long one too, since we brought you on for so many, negative stories. And here we are yet again. The Israeli apartheid forces. I guess here's my first question for you, Ali. I mean, I don't want to be triumphalist about it because obviously it was a terrible assault. But it feels that the Israelis withdrew without, meeting whatever objectives they claim they had set. They're saying they're going to have to go back in. And it's being just like, oh, Israel withdraws. But it seems like, they at least faced a tactical defeat here in Jenin camp from the Palestinian people.
Yeah, and that is perhaps the positive story, is the strength of Palestinian resistance, the determination of the Palestinian resistance, its growing capabilities, and the strong unity and support for it among the Palestinian population. And my colleague here at the Electronic Intifada, Maureen Murphy, wrote a really great analysis on the aftermath of Israel's rampage in Jenin, pointing out that really behind the boasts of the Israeli military and political leadership about, we achieved all our objectives, they really achieved nothing. Even Israeli analysts are pointing out that the Israeli military estimates that there are hundreds of resistance fighters in Jenin, and that the Israeli army claims to have killed a dozen. Of course, that's a severe and tragic loss for the Palestinian families and communities, but it makes no difference to the capabilities of the resistance in the long run. And the same with the weapons they claim to have captured or destroyed. These are a drop in the bucket of what the resistance likely possesses or is able to manufacture. And today, we saw an Israeli soldier killed in a resistance operation in the occupied West Bank. Near Kedumim settlement, which happens to be the settlement where Israeli minister, the fanatical far-right extremist Bezalel Smotrich, lives. And again, that goes to show that for all of its rampages and bluster, the very next day, the Palestinian resistance is still capable of carrying out, of dealing a severe blow to the occupation. This was an officer who was killed, and that officer was no safer for the rampage that Israel carried out in Jenin over the last week or so.
And I mean, just to clarify too, that one of the things that the Israeli spokesperson, Richard Hecht, was saying, the Israeli military spokesperson was saying quite openly, boasting about in US media, was that the goal of the operation was to, quote, break the safe haven mindset of Jenin refugee camp. So this was a pretty open and blatant attack on everybody, to make them scared of allowing resistance people to be among them. And of course, that definitely did not work despite all the devastation, because that's not how it works, right? Because people either have the option to like submit to everything Israel wants and just like be subjects and occupied forever and pushed out, or to fight back. And they're choosing to fight back. But also, what was interesting about this moment, and something you all covered at Electronic Intifada, was the way in which the Palestinian Authority and the institutions that represent it were being attacked also by those who were angry about the collaboration with the Israelis. I mean, we heard a lot of statements from the Palestinian Authority, statements that we often hear whenever Israel does anything, that upsets the population too much, such as no more security coordination and these sorts of things. But you had Palestinian like PA police stations being burnt, being attacked. You had fights between these people because at one point it was like these PA police forces were in fact, trying to put down resistance, which is what they often, do. That's their whole point of being. Can you talk a little bit about that, about how we're seeing more episodes of Palestinians being fed up with this force that was created by the Americans and the Israelis to police Palestinians?
Yeah. Let me answer the question this way. Israel always dresses its operations, its attacks, as having tactical military goals. We want to capture so-called terrorists or destroy weapons workshops or whatever they say. The goals of this attack on Jenin were strictly political. They were first and foremost to satisfy the bloodlust of Israeli settlers and the Israeli public more generally, who have been angered by the fact that Palestinian resistance has been growing stronger in the West Bank, and the most fanatical leaders in Israel, like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, have been demanding blood. I mean, really demanding that Palestinian blood be spilled. And since Netanyahu's coalition depends on them, he had to give them some red meat. And this rampage through a refugee camp, where thousands of civilians live, and the wholesale destruction of the infrastructure there, attacking the hospital in Jenin camp, all of this is part of the revenge that the settlers demand. So that's one political goal. The other political goal, and this comes to your question, Rania, was shoring up the Palestinian Authority, because Benjamin Netanyahu said it the other day. He said, we don't want the Palestinian Authority to collapse. We need the Palestinian Authority. And when they do their job for us, they do it well. Those were Netanyahu's words just a week or so ago. Jenin and the northern West Bank more generally, Jenin, Nablus, and areas around there, have been real strongholds of Palestinian resistance. And the Israeli and American sponsors of the Palestinian Authority have been demanding that the Palestinian Authority go in and crush the resistance. But of course, the Palestinian Authority isn't capable of doing that, no matter how much they wanted to do it. And so Israel went into Jenin, and one of the stated goals was to sort of clear out the resistance, to allow the Palestinian Authority to come back in and exert control on behalf of Israel. But again, this produced exactly the opposite effect, as the dramatic scenes from Jenin showed, where Palestinians kicked out the top leaders affiliated with the Fatah ruling party of the Palestinian Authority, of Mahmoud Abbas's ruling party. People shouting, "Barra, barra, barra, get out, get out, get out," and attacking or invading Palestinian Authority facilities in Jenin was an expression of the disgust that Palestinians generally feel at the collaborationist role the Palestinian Authority plays and was set up to play. Because remember that the Palestinian Authority has tens of thousands of men under arms, armed with the permission of Israel and funded and trained by the United States and the European Union, with the collaboration of countries like Jordan. They're actually trained in Jordan to a great extent. And they just, when the Israelis show up, they go to their barracks or they disappear. And people are saying, why isn't this Palestinian Authority army effectively out there defending Palestinians from the settlers, at least? The tear gas they're using and the guns they have are being turned on Palestinians, not against those who are attacking Palestinians and invading their land. So there's no amount of spin that the Palestinian Authority or its sponsors can put on this. Palestinians can see it for what it is, and which is a an arm of the Israeli occupation, and it's impossible now to paper that over. When young men are giving their lives to defend Jenin refugee camp, to defend Nablus, to defend Jerusalem, men who aren't given training, men who aren't provided arms funded and supported by the European Union and the United States, people are understandably outraged that these so-called Palestinian Authority security forces are doing absolutely nothing to defend their people. What are they there for? They're there to defend Israel and the settlers from the Palestinian people. And that's simply a repulsive and disgusting situation for any people under occupation.
Well, and Ali, we've alluded to it here. I mean, I'm always hesitant to say something's more extreme than the past. I mean, the whole Zionist project is extreme, but I mean, in the way it's like if we're talking about, say, the New York Times, they'll have like one article that will say this happened in Jenin and Palestinians are upset, zero context, and like maybe 4 weeks later or something, they'll have some story about settlers taking over more land. No real connection between the two. But I mean, it does seem that when you look at this this government now, that there is a truly aggressive push to seize huge amounts of land in the West Bank. Like, this is not random that the Palestinian resistance has had to ramp up here. It's not just random violence. I mean, it seems to be directly related to, again, the whole thing is extreme, but what seems like a truly extreme land grab here.
I think you're right, but again, if I can provide a little bit of context, Israel's tactics are not different. Israel has been attacking refugee camps, murdering civilians, stealing land since its founding and since before its founding. That's how it came to be, and that's how it exists. I think the difference now is that Israel no longer feels a need to disguise what it's doing in any way. They no longer feel a need to put a liberal veneer over this brutal, racist settler colony. They now can do it in the open because they know that Joe Biden will back them, Barack Obama will back them, Nancy Pelosi will back them, Donald Trump will back them, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will back them. Nobody will demand any accountability from them. They can murder children. They can murder Palestinian Americans like Shireen Abu Akleh, or the Palestinian American great-grandfather Omar Assad, who was murdered by the Israeli army last January. They can do this with total impunity. And on the contrary, Congress will keep voting them weapons package after weapons package. Mm-hmm. So why, if you're Israel, why go to all the trouble of pretending to be a liberal democracy when you can just wear your fascism on your sleeve? Just the same way that, fascists in Ukraine can do that, and they will have the whole Western media whitewashing them and pretending that what we see with our own eyes is not actually there. And I think also it's important to note that, one of the liberal responses to Palestinian resistance has always been, if you Palestinians just put down your arms and behave nicely, the whole world will come and support you, and just behave like Martin Luther King, and don't give the Israelis an excuse. Don't be like those big bad groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza who fire rockets at Israel. Well, those liberal arguments are exposed by what Israel is doing, because you have, in a sense, kind of a controlled experiment in the West Bank, where for years and years and years, the collaborationist Palestinian Authority suppressed armed resistance on behalf of Israel. There was little to no armed resistance. Palestinians would go out on unarmed marches in villages like Bil'in or Nabi Saleh or wherever it was, and people would know about it. It would be covered to some extent in the media. Did that stop the Israelis stealing land, building Jewish-only colonies, murdering Palestinians, putting thousands of Palestinians in prison, raiding homes every night? No. The absence of armed resistance only gave Israel a green light to escalate its theft of Palestinian land in the West Bank. So what Palestinians in the West Bank are concluding, like Palestinians in Gaza, is that armed resistance is imposed on them by the conditions that exist. It's not something that they take up wantonly or just because they're not smart enough to know, as well as those commentators sitting in Washington or New York or Europe or wherever it is. For Palestinians, resistance is an existential matter. If they stop resisting, they will be wiped off the map by the Euro-American settler colony that is Israel. And this is openly declared by the Israeli government, that only Jews have a right to nationhood or statehood or existence in the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. So resistance is something that Palestinians have. As Nelson Mandela said, it is the oppressor who determines the mode of the struggle, and it is Israel that has determined that there is going to be, unfortunately, a violent armed struggle to liberate Palestine, because Israel has given the people of Palestine no other option to obtain their basic rights and liberation. That's the choice Israel made. That's the choice Joe Biden makes by continuing to arm Israel. That's the choice that the European Union makes by continuing to arm and finance Israel. And they are to blame. They are to blame for the bloodshed, not Palestinians who are resisting, exercising their right to resist.
Mm-hmm. Well, as always, Ali, we really appreciate you coming on and helping us sort through all of this in the midst of the Western media fog. Electronic Intifada, can't recommend it more higher, but thanks again for giving us some of your time here in the Freedom Side.
Thank you. Thank you for covering it.